Chapter 53. The Lord and his disciples' departure to Nazareth. Says Faustus, "So I need to give the order to load my things on board?" Say I, "It has already been done. Since your ships would not have sufficed, Baram and Kisjona have loaned their 2 big ships for the purpose, and everything but the departure is finalized." Says Faustus, "That is sure to be so. I would no longer question, for what should not be possible to the Almighty? But now Joel and Jeruth, together with Archiel, step over to me to thank me for everything. Parting with me amidst much thanksgiving, and starting on their way to Sishar, they are met by the deputation that I foretold them, and are received with much honour, imploring Jonael, with the solemn entreaty, to accept back the office of the high priest. And both Jonael and Jeruth recall how I had predicted it to them. We, however, after my repeated rendition of parables on the kingdom of heaven, Matthew chapter 13, verse 53, and after letting the Sisharites go, took leave of Kisjona with the promise of soon calling on him again, and who upon my advice stayed home this time, and also did not accompany Faustus. About 2 hours to midday we boarded a big ship, travelling with Faustus, who with his young wife had taken his place on my ship, to the vicinity of Capernaum, where the landing place was located for this city as well as for Nazareth, which, as known, is not far from Capernaum. After we landed and stepped ashore, Faustus said, "Lord, I shall go with you to Nazareth and restore their dwelling to your mother and your earthly brothers and sisters." Say I, "This also is already done, and at home and out there in your large court district you shall find everything in the nicest and best order, because my Archiel has settled all your affairs. But go yourself to Capernaum, and when you run into the chief Jairus, which is certain to occur, and when he complains to you about his pains, then tell him that I shall now be staying in Nazareth for some time. If he desires anything, then he should come to me, but only by himself." Says Faustus, "Could I accompany him?" Say I, "Oh, indeed, but also only yourself." With these words we parted. I now leave for my earthly fatherland with my numerous disciples, and Faustus at once orders a lot of carriers, packers, and wagons by which he moves the treasures to be brought along to his dwelling in Capernaum. That the moving in of the Chief Justice so richly loaded by the side of a beautiful wife, arousing much sensation, hardly needs mentioning. But it is even easier to imagine that the chief of the Pharisees there, named Jairus, came to meet him for many reasons, for he also knew something of the troop of the 12 Pharisees to Jerusalem, and that Faustus had been summoned to kiss on their account. Faustus received him with full esteem, saying to him, "One honest one was saved, and the pledges which were unjustly extorted by these Pharisees in secret from the Jews have been restored to them to the last cent, and 11 are now enjoying their well-earned punishment in the temple in Jerusalem for their numerous, unheard-of deceptions and robberies. It would be too long-winded to tell you everything the 11 have perpetrated, but when you enjoy some leisure, come and read all the files, and your hair will stand on end. But now to another matter. How are things with your sweet daughter? Does she live, or has she died?" says an exceedingly sad Jairus, starting to cry. "Oh, friend, why did you remind me of it? She unfortunately died, for no physician could help her. The only physician, Boris of Nazareth, said that he could indeed help her, but would not because I had sinned too exceedingly against his friend Jesus, who is his master. And so my most beloved has died." It was heartrending how the dying one cried out to Jesus that he should help her, and however, whilst dying, castigated me for sinning so despicably against Jesus, the greatest benefactor of poor suffering mankind, that she now has to irrevocably die. I had indeed tried everything to find Jesus, that he should help her. But Jesus would not hear my messengers, although I have now repented my sin against him 1,000-fold. But it is all over now. She has lain in the grave already 4 days and stinks pestilentially. May Jehovah now have grace and mercy upon her beautiful soul. Says Faustus, "Friend, I sympathize with you wholeheartedly. But I also say unto you that the Almighty Lord Jesus is now at Nazareth. According to my wide-ranging experience now, nothing is impossible to him. How now, if you went to him personally? I say unto you, he has power aplenty to call your daughter out of the grave into life and to give her back to you." Says Jairus, "Even if the latter were no longer possible, I nevertheless want to go over and ask his 1,000-fold forgiveness for offending and saddening him, even though not voluntary, of course, but under coercion." Says Faustus, "Good, then come along with me. We shall meet up with him in Nazareth, and that at his mother's house. But by his explicit wish, no one is to accompany us." Jairus, gripped by a blissful premonition, at once goes along with Faustus's suggestion. Both have mules saddled, trotting off to Nazareth as quickly as possible. A couple of hours to sunset, they reach Nazareth, leaving their mules at an inn and continuing on foot to my mother's house, finding me with Boris, who was one of the first from Nazareth to come and meet me with open arms, for he was apprised of my arrival at Nazareth that day. As Faustus entered the room with Jairus, the latter began to cry, falling down before me and begging me loudly that I would forgive him his immense sin of ingratitude which he committed against me. I say to him, however, "Arise, your transgression is forgiven you, but do not sin a second time. Where is your daughter buried?" Speaks Jairus, "Lord, you are aware of my having erected a school for the children of the land not far from here, provided with a small house of prayer. Inside this house of prayer I had a tomb built for myself. Since my daughter died before, however, I had her brought there and laid in the new tomb, where no dead had lain yet. This tomb is hardly 2,000 paces distant from here. If you, O Lord, would want to view her, it would make me blissful beyond measure, for otherwise I would be grieved to death." Say I, "Well then, so take me there, but none besides yourself and Faustus must follow me." The disciples, however, asked me whether they must not be present either. Say I, "This time no one other than the two concerned." Says Boris, "Lord, you know me, that I can be mute like a fish. Would there be any harm in me as a physician accompanying you?" Say I, As I have spoken, it is to be. Only us three, and no one else.